The whole purpose behind preventative maintenance is to make sure that your trucks aren't breaking down, that they're properly serviced, and that there's no surprises when something bad happens in your community. If you have a fire in your community and you have a structural fire or a commercial fire and you're unable to respond because your trucks have not been properly serviced, there is a large chance of loss of life, number one, and number two, loss of property. I'm just going to walk through a weekly inspection on a pump truck. I always like to start with all my inspections with the engines not running and that type of thing so that the oil levels are at their peak. So we'll start out by checking the oils. On this particular case, the level's right up to the top of where it needs to be, so the oil's good on this truck. So I walk from the engine oil, I check the power steering to make sure the levels are all good in the power steering. I want to make sure that my power steering fluids are right up to where they need to be. The truck hasn't been run, so I'm looking for the maximum cold level, and it's showing that it's full onto there. And we can also check it with the dipstick and see that there is oil at the right level on the truck. The next thing I want to do is I want to get in and I want to check the belts to make sure there's no cracks or any fraying or anything like that, and make sure the tensions are proper. So to do that, just use a flashlight to get in, take a look at the belt itself, make sure there's no cracking or anything like that. So the next thing I'm going to check is the antifreeze levels. And as you can see, we have a low mark here and a full mark here. We found on this truck here, if the level's sitting right at the seam here, it's a perfect level for the water. If it goes right up to the full mark, we end up with some antifreeze blowing off. So the antifreeze level on this truck is perfect the way it stands right now. The other thing you want to do is maybe take a look at your air filter gauges to see whether they need to be reset. Make sure that they're not in the red. As you can see on this one here, we're in the proper areas for the filter. These filters are typically checked twice a year in September and in March when we do our yearly services on the trucks. And normally about once a year we end up changing filters. Okay, the next thing that we want to check on the truck is to make sure the transmission levels are okay. With the engine running, you need to check the transmission oil levels. And it's just a matter of reaching into your dipstick, pulling it out, and you're going to be looking for things like clarity of oil. Make sure there's no burning in the oil. You normally can smell burning if there is any, and you want to check your oil levels to make sure that they're where they need to be. But again, that needs to be done with the engine running. And as final stuff that you want to be doing on the inspection underneath the hood is you want to take a quick look at all your hoses and make sure that there's no cracks or anything on your air intake hoses, on your coolant hoses and that kind of thing. As you can see, most of the lines are steel on here with rubber elbows and that kind of thing. Everything looks great underneath the hood on this truck. The last thing you want to check while you're underneath the hood is you want to take a look at your fuel filters. And if you have a water separator type filter on your truck, you want to make sure that there's no water in there. If there is water, you just open up the cocks in the bottom and drain off any water. On this truck here, everything's nice and clean, the fuel's 100%. And what I'm doing now is just checking off all the stuff that I checked underneath the hood to make sure I didn't do anything. I did the engine oil level, transmission oil level, coolant level, hoses, belts, air filter, and I added in the fuel filters because I knew they were there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the cab. We're going to start working our way around the truck this way. So the next step is getting inside the cab and checking out some of the features inside. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to be working on the interior of the cab and checking a number of different things. So I'll have to turn the master switch on. And one of the first things I want to be checking is the fuel level on the truck. Our standard operating guideline is the truck gets no lower than 3/4 of a tank. If it's anywhere near 3/4 of a tank, we will fill the truck up. At this point in time, this is slightly over 3/4 of a tank, so we're good. Next thing I want to do is I want to check all my interior lights, make sure they're all working properly, and they're looking good. We've got the map lights, which are red, and your standard daytime lights, which are white. And they're all working fine. Our cab lights are on, so we can take a look at our run books, that kind of thing. So I'm happy with my interior lights. I'm going to be turning my headlights on so that I can see if I've got dash lights. And at this point, we have all our dash lights are working. Everything's backlit very well. While I'm taking a look at that, the other thing I want to do is I want to record the mileage of the truck. And at this point in time, this truck's got 23,417 kilometers. And that helps you keep track for your preventative maintenance programs. So if you know what your mileage is, you can do your calculation to make sure that you're getting your oil changed and that type of thing at the right time. We find that if we change the oil in our trucks twice a year, we're doing fairly well. I want to do a radio check to make sure the radio's working properly. Pump 3 radio check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Pump 3.
Thank you. Radio check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the next thing I want to check is the siren and the PA. To check the siren, I want to make sure that the switch is on, and I'll just go to one of the settings on there. And you don't need to let that run for any length of time. Just if it goes off, it's working fine. Next thing would be to check the PA system. Check one. And that's working fine also. So that completes the siren and PA check. Next thing that we're going to be checking is the horn on the truck to make sure it's working. The horn's working great on the truck, so no problems with that. Next thing we're going to be checking is all the flashlights that are in the cab of the truck to make sure that they're all functional. If the flashlights appear weak or anything like that, now's the time to change the battery rather than at a fire scene. And all the flashlights check out good. The next thing I want to check is to make sure our run book is in the truck. The run book includes all of our maps for the town of Hay River. And we just want to make sure that everything's in there as it should be. We've got all the highway systems, the Catlodici Reserve, and all the maps for the town itself are all in here. And it's looking good. The other thing that we're going to be making sure that is in the truck is our AED. And we want to make sure that the AED is still functional. So we'll turn it on. And we're showing good battery on it, so it's good to go.
Connect electrode.
Okay, as part of the cab, the last thing we want to check is to make sure that the windshield washer fluid is full. On this truck, it sits underneath the passenger seat. So it's a matter of pulling off the cap and just taking a peek at it, and I can see the levels right up to where it should be on this truck. And that completes the cab inspection on the truck. Inspections, really important. Document them. Make sure you have a good documentation system where all your files are kept, and keep them for years. If you haven't done all the checks and made sure your trucks are all running properly, there's a strong chance of any liabilities being charged back to your community. Next thing we want to do is check out all the emergency lights, headlights, tail lights, any lights that are on the exterior of the truck. And what we'll do to do that is we'll do a walk around the truck. I'll fire up the master switch and start turning lights on. So we're making sure that the flashers are all working. Typically I go to the four-way flashers. If the four ways are working, generally speaking, the turn signals are going to work properly. Can check the grill lights, and our light bars all working. Looks like all the clearance lights on top of the cab are working as they should. We have clearance lights on the sides that we want to make sure are working. They are working also. Some of the other lights that we want to worry about are down the side, our panel lights, and all of our lighting at the back of the truck. We want to check and make sure all our pump panel lights are all working properly, and that there's no bulbs out or anything like that. This one here is working fine, so I'm happy with that. We're also going to go through, we're going to check all the cabinets as we walk around the truck, and we're going to make sure all of our cabinet lights are up and running. And this cabinet's looking good so far. And cabinet lights are working in this cabinet. We're just going to check the last cabinet lights on the rear compartments on the driver's side, and they appear to be working fine. It's really important that all of our lights are working in the cabinets. It gets pretty dark at night, and not being able to find equipment is not an option when you're on a fire scene. I'm now going to check all the lights in the back of the truck. What I want to take a look at is to make sure that the rear rotators are working. They're both working fine. We want to check our scene lights. And high and low are both working nicely on here. We have backup lights on here. And then we've got our tailboard lights, which are fairly important, so you can see what's going on in your tailboard. They're all working fine. And our license plate light is working, so I'm happy with that. The buzzer works so that people can be, the driver can be warned so it's safe to move the truck and that type of thing. The signal lights are working. They're on 4 ways, so both sides are working fine. Our normal tail lights are working. Our emergency lights are also working, so I'm happy with that. One of the last things we want to check is the backup lights. And typically, if you're going to be checking your backup lights and your brake lights, you need to have 2 people. One to stand at the back of the truck and one to be in control of the truck with the engine running in reverse. So it's important you have 2 people to do that. Okay, and we want to check the interior lights or cabinet lights, and they appear to be working fine. And we're able to see in the back of the truck, so that's all good. Now we're going to check the passenger side cabinet lights, and we're looking good so far. And I'll just continue down the side of the truck checking all the cabinet lights. And that's looking good. Lights good. And it checks off well. The pump panel lights are working as they should. And while I'm here, I'll just take a peek underneath the truck. If I look down the ground here, I can see that the proximity lights are working on the truck. So that lights up the ground when we're at a fire scene in the dark. I want to check the scene light on the side of the truck. It's just a matter of turning the switch on and it should light up. That's working fine. Clearance lights are working on the side and the front, passenger side, and headlights are working as they should. Everything looks good in the lighting package on the truck, and that covers all the lights. Next, we want to check all our fluid levels to make sure everything's all copacetic. First level we want to take a look at is the water level, and it's showing it as 100%. The other thing I want to look at is my foam tank. My foam tank's sitting at 100%. The other things I want to be checking while I'm in here, I want to make sure that our fans are working. They're both working. Bypass valve is functional. Heat exchanger valve is functional. Step and panel lights are functional. Canopy heaters working. And it looks like all our gauges and everything else are in good shape. Next thing, I'll check out my interior lights up in here. And they're all functioning properly. Okay, the next thing we want to check is our primer level, which is the oil tank that runs or supplies the primer pump on the truck. And as you can see, the primer is a little bit low. So we'll top that up with automatic transmission fluid. And that takes care of the primer pump. Okay, the next thing you want to check when you're doing the pump compartment on the truck is you want to check your SCBA. Make sure you got a mask that's in good shape, that's ready to be used. So you want to do an inspection and make sure the harness is all in good shape. There's no frays, tears, or anything. Make sure it's fully extended. So the straps are all fully extended on that now. You want to make sure that the nose cup is properly installed. And you also want to make sure your exhalation valve is working properly down in here. And that's just a matter of getting in there and touching it with a pen. to open up the exhalation valve. And it's not sticking, so it's all good. You also want to make sure there's no scratches on the face piece or any damage to the mask anywhere. So the mask is in good shape. Next thing we're going to be doing is taking a quick look at the SCBA to make sure it's all going to be functional, making sure it's full of air, making sure that the battery's good. And to do that, we're going to turn on the cylinder. And we got a check mark which is telling us the battery is good. The tank is at 4,095 psi, which meets our standards. It normally would be filled to 4,400, but we will enter a building at 4,000. Battery checked out good. Harnesses and everything else are looking pretty good. The mic has come on. So we're pretty happy with this particular SCBA. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to shut down the cylinder. We're going to drain off the air to make sure our pass alarms and everything are all working properly. We'll just let it sit for a couple seconds and see if the pass comes on. Okay, pass alarm is functioning normally, and we'll see if the low air alarms are working now. Low air alarm should go off at about 1,800 psi. You want to drain this slowly. And the low air alarm is working as expected. And you want to shut down. And that completes the SCBA test. The same thing will be done with the other two SCBAs to make sure all of them are working properly. Want to make sure our seat belts are fully extended so that the guys can get seat belted in when we're responding to a fire. A couple of the other small things that we'd want to be checking is we want to make sure that our auxiliary battery for our TIC is up and charged up, and a TIC being thermal imaging camera, and we can see the battery's good on that, and we have to recharge the battery on the thermal imaging camera itself. Other than that, that should do pretty much all the inspection except for the inventory of the truck. So the last thing you want to do is you want to make sure your sidewalls and everything else are good on your tires. What I'm looking for is cracking or anything on the tire. You want to check and make sure your tire pressures are good. You can normally get your tire pressure off the tire, and it's fairly close to the rim. On this particular one, it's 120 psi. The other thing you can do is use the manufacturer's operating manuals or maintenance manuals and find out what their recommended pressures are for the tires, because it could be different than what the tire actually says it needs to be. And these tires are good. Some of the other things you want to be checking for is to check your hubs, make sure that there's no oil leaking out of them. That would be a bad thing if there is. It needs to be serviced. As soon as you have any oil showing up on there, you want to make sure your lug nuts are all fairly tight or tight. And that pretty much covers anything got to do with tires. I'd like to talk a little bit about post-fire requirements, things you should be doing to your pump after you've finished a firefight or training night or anything like that. And what I'm going to be going through is what should be happening year-round. I feel that anything that you're doing for one particular season, it's a good idea to follow it through for all seasons, so you're doing the same thing after every call. So what I'll be going through is the draining of the pump and that type of thing. Your pump should be totally dry after you've finished a fire, and you should, when you're responding to a fire, the pump should be dry but have full water tanks and that type of thing. So what I'll be doing is I'll show you what valves to open up and how to drain your pump totally, and what to do to your fittings and stuff so that they don't freeze when you're responding to a call. I'll also go over a little bit of inventory, checking your inventories to make sure that your trucks are back and ready for service. If you finished a firefight or training session, you want to make sure that all your equipment's back on your unit and ready to function. We're going to start out by going inside the pump compartment, and we're going to be opening up all the valves so we can drain all the water and that out of them. You want to open up all your valves throughout the whole truck except for your tank supply valve or your tank to pump valve. This one here you want to leave closed because you don't want to introduce water into your system that you don't need to. So ensure your tank to pump is closed, and then you can open up all your other valves on the truck. First thing post-fire, when you get back to the haul, is you want to open up all your intake and discharge valves. You want to open everything else, everything but your tank supply valve or your tank to pump valve. Everything else should be opened up totally. And once all your valves are in that position, you can go to the outside of the truck. The next step that you want to do is you're going to open up all your caps and you're going to drain all your valves. So open everything up, make sure that there's no water in anything. You want to open up all your drain valves on your truck so you can totally drain out anything that's in the system, and that includes your master drain valve. You want to do this on every connection on the truck, whether you use them or not, at the end of the post-fire inspection. Once everything is drained, you have no water coming out of the truck. As you saw, the pump is dry right now on this one. You need to antifreeze all of your couplings so they won't freeze if you go out on a call. So it's just a matter of spraying some RV antifreeze onto the threads, and then tighten everything hand tight onto the truck. I find if you put all your antifreeze on the female portion of the coupling, it makes it a lot easier. And once all the water is finished draining out of your truck, leave your master drain open until you respond to a call. But these ones here, once they're finished, you can close these all back up again so you're ready to respond. Once you have your truck with all the ports closed, your discharges and your intakes closed off with the proper plugs or caps, and you have all your valves closed off, you can leave your master drain open until you respond to the next call, and then all you have to do to prepare for water is push in your master drain valve and your pumper's ready to go. As you can see, we've got a picture of the side of the truck with all of our cabinets marked here, and corresponding to each one of these cabinets they're addressed with an address. The D2 compartment, for example, is right here, and it gives a listing of all the equipment we're going to find inside the cabinet. So we have a Halligan bar, which is here on the truck. We have a chain with various hose gaskets. We have a attic nozzle, which is here. We have a closet hook, which is right here. And you have one axe. So we have a typical axe, which with the Halligan gives us our irons for forcible entry. And we're supposed to have one short pike pole, which is here. And the last piece of kit that we're supposed to have in here is a water wall, and that's on there. So you can see how quick it is to do a very quick inventory on your truck post-fire. We know all our equipment's there. If anything's missing, as soon as you finish that fire, you can go back to the fire scene, training ground, or wherever it is, and find the piece of kit that's missing. We find that very good, and if these inspections are done every week, with your weekly inspection and done post-fire, your firefighters will get a real good idea of where all the emergency equipment is on their units, which will make for a much better response. We'll talk a little bit about post-fire inspections and inspections that should be done on your turnout gears. So some of the stuff you want to be making sure is that your visor on your helmet's in good shape. Make sure there's no cracks or anything like that in it, no burns. And you also want to make sure that all this stuff is clean. The days of the dirty old firefighters got all the soot and stuff like that on their gear is no longer. It's a proven fact that there's an awful lot of carcinogens that are found on your bunker gear, and if you're not cleaning it properly, you're exposing yourself to some very hazardous materials, and you're putting yourself at risk to getting cancer. So typically after every fire, you should be coming back, you should be checking your gear to make sure that, number one, it's clean. If it's not clean, it needs to be cleaned. So to clean your gear, all you have to do is have a heavy-duty washing machine. You take your gear apart. So you have to take your interior liner out of your bunker gear. And it's just a matter of undoing all the snaps and that kind of thing. You can wash your outers together with themselves, pants and jacket together, and the inners have to be done in a separate load. You don't want to get any of the carcinogens and crud that's on the outside of this gear onto the inside, because that's close to your skin and it can cause all kinds of damage. So some of the other stuff you're going to be looking for when you're looking at your gear, you're going to be looking for burn holes. You'll be looking for rips and tears on the exterior portion of it. This looks fairly good. We have one small burn on one arm here. And all the cuffs and everything are in good shape. So one small burn on there, and by code that should be sent out for repair. So I guess the important thing to remember is this has to be washed outers separate from the inners. On your bunker gear, you're also going to have a external covering. You're going to have a thermal barrier and a vapor barrier on the inside of it also. You need to make sure that this is all in good shape and that there's no burns or anything like that on there at all. So on this particular type of bunker gear, you can actually get into it to check in between your different your layers. So in your pants, pretty much come apart the same way as your jacket does. When you're doing your inspection on your pants and that type of thing, you should be making sure that your suspenders are all in good shape, your reflex lights all in place and in good shape. You want to make sure that all your elastic bands and your straps are all not frayed or damaged or anything like that, or overstretched, and if they are, they need to be replaced. All your gear will come with a label on the inside of it. The label will give some instructions onto it, but most importantly, the label has the date of manufacture on it. On this particular set of gear, we are looking at manufacture date of July 27th, 2011. So that means in July 27th, 2021, this gear is no longer able to be used. It should be cut up and scrapped. And that's NFPA regulations that say that. Your fire boots, same thing, good for 10 years. So you're going to do a quick inspection on your boots. You're going to be checking your soles. A little bit of dirt, but that's all right. You'll be checking your toes for wear. You want to be checking for any cuts or any holes in your boots so that you're not getting any hot water inside your boots or anything like that. And these boots are pretty much brand new, so they're in good shape. So I guess the important things, take a look at your date of manufacture, look for any tears or anything. If you do have any damage to your bunker gear, it needs to be repaired. It needs to be clean. So after every fire, ensure that you're cleaning your gear. The carcinogens that build up on top of your bunker gear is really not good for your health. So please be a new style firefighter and keep things clean. This is another post-fire operation that we take care of after every fire. What we want to do is we want to make sure that any hoses we used are properly hung and dried. That stops damages from mildew, that kind of thing. We also want to make sure that there's absolutely no water left inside the hoses, because if we put the hose back on the truck in the winter months with any water in it at all, it'll freeze, it'll clog nozzles and that kind of thing. So drying your hoses is extremely important when you're dealing with anything in the wintertime. So we'll raise the hose up. Okay, and this is where we hoist the hose up. We'll flip the hose off of the sling, place it on top of the drying rack, and this will normally sit here the hoses normally are dry in about 4 hours if we crank the heaters on. The tower is equipped with a dehumidifier, so it dehumidifies the air for us and makes it so our hoses are totally dry inside and out and ready to be reused right away. You'll find with our fire department, we have history dating back right to the time we've bought our trucks. So if somebody asks us what's going on with the truck, is there any problems with it, we can give a pretty honest answer as to what's going on. So record keeping is important. And believe me, people like WSCC's out there watching to make sure that we're doing things properly. So keep up your reporting, keep up your inspections, and make sure your equipment's in good shape.